Today we're talking about the INTP personality type. What are the strengths and weaknesses of this personality type? What is the cognitive stack that describes this personality type? And what are the types of compatibilities that the INTP has with other types in general when it comes to friendship and romantic relationships? Please do not forget to like and subscribe, and let's dive in. All right, so how about the letters that describe the INTP personality type? Again, guys, as you probably remember from most of my previous videos on INFJ, ENTP, ESFJ, ESFP, and so on, I'm a big supporter of the idea that truly understanding a personality type is more related to the cognitive functions than the letters. However, we can focus on understanding some brief general aspects about the tendencies that any personality type has by looking at the 4 letters in the type description. Right, so in this case we have I, which stands for introversion. This means that the INTP is more likely to draw energy from the inside world rather than the outside world. Then we have N, which stands for intuition. This is the trait that makes the INTP more likely to focus on abstract ideas, theories, and concepts rather than the practical material world. Then we have T, which stands for thinking. This means that in terms of the decision-making process, the INTP prefers looking at objective aspects when making decisions, and they prioritize these kind of aspects in order to reach a specific conclusion. Again, that is not to say that they do not have feelings or they do not care about feelings, it's just that they prioritize rationality when making decisions in general. And lastly, we have P, which stands for perceiving. This means that the INTP prefers to be in a more flexible environment, an environment which allows them to explore and be spontaneous rather than have very fixed and tight deadlines and structures. Okay, and now let's get into the cognitive stack of the INTP personality. The dominant function of this type is introverted thinking. If you remember from the ISTP video, where this is also the dominant function, introverted thinking is basically the cognitive function that asks the question, what works for me? So what are the logical aspects that apply to me as a person? What are the things that work in my experience when it comes to work, when it comes to relationships, when it comes to hobbies or anything else? The INTP is quite likely to be focused on this function a lot, trying to analyze and understand things in a logical way. They direct their attention from the outside world into the internal world by using logic and objectivity. At the same time, introverted thinking is very good at understanding structures and frameworks and how things connect to each other within that structure or framework. Here we could be discussing the human body, we could be discussing the engine of a car or an algorithm, anything that has a more intricate, let's say, connection of elements within the system. And this is basically one of the superpowers that introverted thinking has. The auxiliary function of the INTP personality, and probably the healthiest function of this type, is extraverted intuition. So what about extraverted intuition? If you remember from the videos where we discussed ENTP or ENFP, the 2 types of personalities where extraverted intuition is the dominant function, this is basically a cognitive process that enables us to look at a lot of different perspectives and alternatives. It's a function that is very curious about brainstorming and exploration. It could go from one idea and explore every single angle that idea can bring about. The INTP is quite curious and interested into seeing things from various different perspectives. So they will be using their introverted thinking to understand a structure or a system and draw some logical conclusions and implications. And then they will use this extroverted intuition in order to explore various different perspectives and angles. And this might even make them a little bit distracted when trying to follow one specific line of thought, because it just spreads them around a lot of different perspectives, and it also makes them rather creative. They tend to enjoy a lot of creative pursuits. Then we have introverted sensing. This is the tertiary function of the INTP personality. When it comes to passive functions, so understanding the world, the INTP has a little bit of an ease in terms of switching between intuition and sensing. So on the one hand, they will use extroverted intuition to explore various different perspectives, to brainstorm, to be very creative about it. But on the other hand, they will use introverted sensing to bring their attention back to, let's say, the practical, pragmatic world. And they will be focused a lot on traditions and rules and procedures. This is not something that comes very naturally to them. However, as they grow older, they become interested in understanding how a specific type of tradition might work out, how a specific type of rule, procedure, regulation can actually help them out in any kind of, let's say, mental process or activity that they engage in. However, if they get stuck in introverted thinking, introverted sensing loop, they will become very introverted and very much focused on applying logic to various types of rules, regulations, procedures, and tradition. And it can make them a little bit rigid. So the key to their mental health is actually using extroverted intuition to break those patterns, okay? So to draw their information from the internal world and then actually use it in some sort of creative pursuit about theoretizing about the world, making a lot of, let's say, ideas and concepts that could enable them to explain what is going on in the world around them and actually have a more philosophical approach to life. And this will break this rigidity pattern that they can get stuck in. And lastly, just in the case, as in the case of the ISTP personality, we have extroverted feeling. This is the inferior function of the INTP personality, and it's the function that they might have a little bit difficulty using. If you remember from the INFJ or the ESFJ video, extroverted feeling is about making decisions in terms of what is important to other people. What are the emotions of other people? What are the values of other people? The INTP can sense what other people are feeling. The INTP can notice what the values of other people are. They might just not be very comfortable into prioritizing this kind of information when they make a decision. They're more likely to focus on what works for them, on what is logical for them, and might have a little bit of difficulty integrating this extroverted feeling perspective into their decision-making process. This can also cause some sort of social anxiety, as you guys have asked me on Instagram if they're more prone to social anxiety. And yes, it can be the case due to this inferior extroverted feeling function. It can make them a little bit, let's say, stressed and anxious when it comes to interacting with people that they don't know very well, especially if they're not yet quite mature in the usage of extroverted feeling. However, it's very important for them to integrate it and actually make use of it because it really helps them in connecting with other people and having better and healthier relationships. I was quite amused when I read one of your questions on Instagram, which was, how do you motivate an INTP to do something? This is something that came up in the ENTP video, and it seems like both ENTPs and INTPs might have a little bit difficulty motivating themselves to do various things. I mean, it's also the case of ISTP and ESTP because introverted thinking can make them procrastinate. And this is because they're trying to find a really good solution, a very efficient solution to something. And unless they find it and unless they understand and analyze things into depth, they might get a little bit, let's say, stuck. And they might try to procrastinate a lot. I wouldn't say that someone else should motivate any of these personality types. I think it's a long-term process, and it happens when they've integrated more perspectives and more cognitive functions into how they work and operate. Right, and lastly we have type compatibilities or relationships with other personality types. Stereotypically speaking, the INTP gets along best with other personality types that make use of thinking as a dominant function. So this would be ISTP, ENTJ, and ESTJ. However, as you guys have noticed in my previous videos, I'm a big supporter of the idea that any personality type can have a very interesting relationships with other types that have the same cognitive functions as them. In this case, it would be ENTP, ISFJ, and ESFJ. They all share introverted thinking, extroverted feeling, extraverted intuition, and introverted sensing. And actually, the INTP can learn a lot from interacting with ESFJs and ISFJs into developing their extroverted feeling, getting better at relating emotionally to other people, not feeling so anxious around them, making more balanced decisions. And also, they can get better at using introverted sensing, which is all about rules, regulations, traditions, stability, things that actually have worked in the past and can be implemented in the present or the future. So thank you guys, thank you a lot for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe and tune in for next week's video.